Hey everyone, welcome back to Rugadum, where the dark doesn't always wait for nightfall. Sometimes it drifts beneath the waves. Tonight's story is called The Price of a Catch. It begins with a fisherman alone on the fog-bound Atlantic, a man drowning in debt until he hauls something from the deep that no net was ever meant to hold. What he finds isn't treasure, it's a promise, whispered in a voice older than the tide, that every debt must be paid, whether in coin or in flesh. So settle in, listen close, and remember, not everything that sings beneath the sea wants to be found. If you enjoy stories that echo long after the lights go out, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the shadows here on Rugadum, where even the calmest waters can hide a scream.
I awoke to the sound of my alarm, the small brass thing rattling between its bells like a trapped insect. The clang echoed through the cabin and was swallowed by the fog pressing against the windows. I reached over and tapped the hull twice, an old superstition from my father. He used to say it wakes her up, meaning the boat. Some mornings I'd talk to her too. Today, I didn't feel much like talking. The alarm wasn't a promise of new opportunity. No, it was another reminder that I'd failed again. Another day without a catch. Another day further from clearing the debts that weighed heavier than my nets. The air inside the cabin was cold enough that my breath misted in the gloom. I swung my legs off the bunk and set my feet on the damp floorboards. Beneath me I could feel the pulse of the sea, the gentle heave and shift of my Cape Islander, rocking as if it were trying to lull me back into a dream I couldn't afford. Almost made me forget why I was out here. Almost. The galley was hardly more than a joke. The small burner, a dented kettle, and a cold locker half filled with melting ice. I struck a match and set the kettle on. The smell of sulfurs, salt, and diesel mingled in the air. Outside, the foghorn of some distant ship moaned like an animal in pain. I listened for it again. Nothing. When the water boiled, I dropped the tea bag into my cracked mug. The Earl Grey's aroma mingled with the brine and the tang of rust, oddly comforting. I poured the water, stirred, and let the warmth fill my hands. For a moment, the small heat and the steady rocking almost felt like peace. I flipped open my logbook, its pages curling from damp air. The past few days stared up at me. Nothing, nothing, nothing. The ink was fading, but the debt written in the margins wasn't. Callahan's name scrawled there in bold blue pen made my gut tighten. He wasn't the kind of man you wanted waiting on you. He didn't take excuses. Only engines, boats, or bones. I shut the book and drank my tea cold. I'd been through tight spots before, but this one felt different. The silence out here was heavy, like the sea was holding its breath. After breakfast, I layered sweaters beneath my rain gear and stepped onto the deck. The fog was so thick I could barely see the lamp swinging above me. The horizon was gone. Just a gray smudge where the sky met the water. Somewhere in that emptiness were my nets, waiting like ghosts. The Grand Banks had always been dangerous, but I had had luck here once. Luck and fish. I checked the compass. The needle quivered, though the air was still. My lamp shone weakly through the mist, halos of yellow light on gray. I tested the radio, but it answered only with static. Sounded like whispering if you listened too long. I turned it off and started the engine. About an hour into casting, I noticed the barometer's needle drop. Slow, steady, falling pressure. Not the worst sign, but enough to put a stone in my stomach. The water was flat as glass, too calm. No chop, no wind, no life. Fish like to churn sea. Today it was like fishing in a graveyard. Net after net came up empty. Ropes burned my palms and my shoulders ached with the weight of nothing. The silence gnawed at me until I started talking aloud just to hear a voice. "Come on," I muttered. "Just one." The sea didn't answer. Panic sat behind my ribs, waiting. Lately, it didn't take much to let it out. Maybe I wasn't cut out for any of this. School hadn't worked out. Factory work was dead back home. Fishing was all I had left. The same thing my father did. Same boat, same salt in the blood. I remembered the stories he told. Fish big enough to swallow a dory whole. Storms that listened when you spoke their name. I believed every word. Maybe I still did. To drown the silence, I started singing one of his old shanties. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. My voice carried out over the calm water, flat and lonely. Then I heard something. An echo. Faint, but clear. I stopped singing. Waited. The air buzzed in my ears, but then it came again. Not a true echo. Slower, lower, like something was humming it back from beneath the waves. I felt the hair rise on my neck. Just the fog, I said to no one. Sound plays tricks out here. I threw another net. Empty. Always empty. The radio crackled suddenly, sharp enough to make me jump. A burst of static, half a syllable, maybe a voice, then dead. I smacked it with my palm, but it stayed silent. Damn thing. I needed a new one, but the price of a radio could fill a tank, and right now, fuel meant survival. I stared at the gray water and wondered if I was already talking to myself too much. By afternoon, the sky had turned darker, the kind of gray that makes you feel small. The air felt wrong, heavy, damp, and thick with something like static. I sat down on the deck, my head in my hands. The sound of the sea lapping against the hull felt like breathing. I hummed a few bars of the shanty under my breath, half prayer, half habit. Soon may the Wellerman come. That's when I heard the nets tighten. The sounds sliced through the stillness like a shout. The despair that had been crushing me vanished in an instant. I jumped up, grabbed the line, and felt it straining in my hands. Heavy, heavier than it any right to be. My pulse quickened. Maybe luck had finally turned. Maybe this was it. The rope burned my palms as I hauled it up. The water around the net rippled dark, like ink spreading through milk. I smelled something sharp, not fish, not rot, something metallic. The net breached the surface and I froze. At first glance, I thought I'd hauled up a corpse. A woman, maybe, pale, limp, tangled in kelp. Her hair streamed black across her face like oil. My heart stuttered. I reached for the gaff, then stopped. Where her legs should have been, there was a tail. Not silver like the stories, gray-blue with ragged scars and fins sharp as blades. The flesh shimmered wetly, patterned like stonefish hide. I stared, mouth dry, as she shifted slightly in the net, her chest rising once. Alive. I dragged her over the gunwale. She was beautiful in the worst way, skin white as moonlight, eyes black as the deep, lips faintly blue. Her hair clung to her shoulders in slick strands. I crouched closer, unsure if I was breathing. Maybe she'd hit her head coming up. Maybe she was dying. Then her eyes snapped open. She screamed, not a human sound, something sharper, splitting the air in two. Her mouth opened wide, revealing teeth like needles pointing in every direction. Instinct took over. I grabbed the net, trying to wrestle her toward the live well as she thrashed, hissing something that might have been words. The sounds scraped at my ears, too fast and fluid to understand. With one desperate shove, I rolled her into the well. She slammed against the sides, water splashing over me as I dropped the lid and threw the latch. The metal clanged shut. I stood there, soaked and shaking, listening to the sound of her tail striking the steel. And then, silence. The silence didn't last. Something banged the lid hard enough to make the whole boat tremble. The live well answered with a frantic wet pounding as she smashed against the metal. The well was roomy for a cod, not for whatever this was. Her sounds were wrong, high, wet, animal and human all at once, like a rabbit desperate in a snare. I planted both feet on the hatch and leaned my weight into it until my thighs burned. Time thinned to the hiss of my breathing and the slap of water against steel. I felt suspended, unable to think straight. Then the questions broke through. What am I doing? Why did my hands move to close her in the well the moment she woke? Fear, yes, but something else nudged at the edges of my mind. If I hauled her back to shore, Callahan's ledger could might as well catch fire. I could be famous overnight. Someone would pay anything, sell her to the highest bidder and walk away. The thought made my stomach go cold. I hated myself for it, hated the shape of the idea, the way it fit like a key in a lock. Desperation, greed, survival, call it what you want. It was a way out, and for a terrifying second, I almost let that be enough. I eased off the hatch and stepped back, palms sticky with salt and shame. The hatch lifted. Just an inch, no more. 2 eyes stared up from the crack, black and rimmed in faint silver, catching what little light was left. Even through that narrow gap, her gaze felt like pressure, like something cold and deep pressing against my chest. Her voice slid through the slit, low, wet, and wrong. You put me in a cage, dry blood. You trap what feeds the tide. She hissed. The sound of her words was strange, as though she were shaping them around a mouth made for something else, stretched, bubbling, too careful. I swallowed hard. You speak English? A sound came from below, something between a laugh and a growl. The lid shifted, scraping against the hinges, and for a heartbeat it lifted higher, just enough for me to glimpse a flash of white beneath the shadow. Not a smile, not human, just a glimpse of teeth, sharp and uneven, catching the faint light before the hatch dropped shut again with a wet thud. Her voice came softer now, almost a whisper, but the metal seemed to carry it straight into my bones. I speak what I must to make the airfolk understand. You'll wish I didn't. You'll wish you'd kept me sleeping. The words came slower, deliberate. Release me, sailor. Let me sink back to the dark, or I'll teach you what the deep does to thieves. The hatch rattled once, hard enough to make the deck ring. I stepped back instinctively, my breath fogging in the dim light. For a moment, all I could hear was her breathing from inside the well, slow, deliberate, and waiting. Then came the faintest sound, a laugh. Not loud, not even human, just a bubbling echo that rose and faded like something remembering what it hates. I went back to the cabin and sat on the edge of my bunk, elbows on my knees, face in my hands. My palms smelled of salt and rust. I replayed the last half hour again and again until the images blurred. The flash of her eyes, the sound of her voice, the weight of the latch under my palms. Shame crawled through me like fever. I'd trapped a living thing, a thinking thing, and for what? To balance a debt ledger? To buy myself a few more months of loneliness afloat? I lifted my head just long enough to catch my reflection in the small metal mirror bolted above the sink. The face looking back didn't seem like mine. Eyes hollow, jaw tight, the kind of face that could make cruel decisions and justify 'em later. 2 days till shore, I muttered. Less if I run all night. I told myself I'd sleep a while and then head in. Just 2 days. Then this would all be over. But sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the creak of the hull, the faint rattle of the hatch, the memory of that bubbling laugh. Hours passed before exhaustion finally pinned me down. Then, music. I woke to it. A song, soft and slow, slipping through the boards of the cabin. The voice was low and liquid, humming in a language I'd never heard. Beautiful, yes, but wrong. The kind of melody that makes you feel the ocean pressing up against the world. I rose from the bunk, heart pounding, and followed the sound toward the hatch. Every part of me wanting to stay put, as if my body knew the song was a trap. Still, some other part, hungrier, more foolish, pulled me toward it, wanting to be nearer to that music, to hear it full. On deck, the melody came from the live well, thin and bright and terrible, like silver on glass. It made my chest ache the way the sailor's tale said the sirens did, Odysseus tied to his mast and raving for the song. In that half-dazed, sleep-drunk state, my hand reached for the latch. For a moment I could almost feel myself untying the knots in my resolve. Then the ledger in my head slammed back into place. Callahan's scrawl, the empty tanks, the nights with nothing in the pots. And it snapped me too. It almost had me. The sea witch almost had me. I slammed my fist down on the hatch until my knuckles stung. "Shut up!" I barked at the well. "Sing one more note and I'll rip your tongue out myself." My voice sounded ridiculous in the fog, but it steadied me. I went below and stuffed cotton in my ears like a child warding off a nightmare, chanting to myself, 2 days, 2 days. Then I slept by force more than rest. When I woke, I made coffee that tasted like metal and bread that was stale. Checked the lines, oiled the winch, and counted out the fuel. Everything that could keep me afloat had to be right. 2 days. Less if I ran all night. While I was tightening the last cleat, the hatch lifted and those black eyes peered up at me. "Dry blood, it is not too late. Release me, and the misfortunes that await you will be less than if you continue with your greed." Her tone was almost conversational, snide like a butcher offering mercy. "Good morning to you too," I said, turning my face away so I wouldn't see her smile. "We'll see about that." She made a soft, bubbling chuckle and sank back down into the dark. The morning came as all the others had. Fog thick as wool and a drizzle that smeared the horizon into gray. I started the engine without trouble, but that's when I noticed the barometer. The needle twitched back and forth like it couldn't decide what world it belonged to. The reading didn't match the weather. I checked my map and compass. Both were off, not by much, but enough to stir unease in my gut. I adjusted course toward the mainland and muttered, 2 days. Just 2 days, like it was a prayer. About an hour in, the drizzle turned to steady rain, and the waves began to roll harder. The strange thing was the sky didn't match the water. The storm wasn't real. The waves moved as if something beneath them was breathing, rising and falling, but the rain was too light for it. I'd seen rough seas before, but something about this wasn't weather. It was intention. Then came a heavy thud on the deck. I glanced out the wheelhouse window. A cod had flopped onto the boards, slick and twitching. "Must have jumped the net," I muttered, reaching for the throttle. Then I froze. The fish turned its head slightly, and I saw its eyes. Black, ringed with that same faint silver I'd seen staring up from the hatch. Another thud, then another. Within seconds, more cod rained down on the deck, slapping onto the boards one after another. Each one had the same black eyes, the same cold stare. In less than a minute, the deck writhed with them, 50, maybe more, flopping and twisting in the rain. "It's just the storm," I told myself. "They must have washed aboard." But even as I said it, I knew better. Then, singing, "Up spoke the captain of our gallant ship." The voice came from behind me, deep and wet and wrong. I turned toward the deck. One of the cod was moving its mouth, the sound bubbling through seawater and blood. "And a brave old skipper was he," another sang, higher pitched, almost gleeful. "This fishy mermaid has warned me of our doom," croaked a third, its belly split open, gills fluttering with every word. "And we shall sink to the bottom of the sea." Then, together, a chorus, ragged, inhuman, dozens of voices rising and falling with the waves. "Sink to the bottom of the sea, sink to the bottom of the sea." Over and over, faster, louder, until it was all I could hear. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound seemed to crawl under my skin, vibrating in my teeth. My vision tunneled. "Stop it!" I roared. "This won't stop me, you sea witch!" I released the wheel, the boat be damned, and stumbled onto the deck, kicking and throwing the fish overboard one by one. They sang even as they flew, voices warping as they hit the waves. "Sink to the bottom of the sea." The hatch to the live well rattled, then lifted an inch. From inside came a laugh, sharp, wet, triumphant. "That's what they all say, dry blood. It's still not too late." I kicked another fish into the dark water, my voice hoarse. "You won't have me." Somehow, through the chaos, the boat held steady. The sea roared. The rain thickened, heavy, driving, relentless, until it drowned out everything else. But even through the storm, I swore I could still hear them beneath the waves, faint and echoing, whispering the same refrain. "Sink to the bottom of the sea, sink to the bottom of the sea." The wheel kicked in my hands as if something beneath the waves was fighting me for it. The sea heaved, great black swells lifting the hull like a toy. The compass spun uselessly, the needle blurring in frantic circles. The barometer's glass fogged with condensation, its needle jerking up and down as if it too were panicking. Then the radio crackled, sharp, sudden, alive. "Release me, dry blood. Release me." The words crawled through the static, each syllable stretching, dragging, wet. Her voice was too close, too inside, like she was whispering through the wires behind my skull. I slammed a fist against the receiver. "Shut up," I muttered, more to the air than to her. The hiss turned to laughter, soft, bubbling, and then went dead. I kept my eyes on the dark horizon, though the line between sea and sky had vanished. I couldn't tell where I was heading anymore, only that the boat still moved. My hands ached from the cold, the muscles in my back screamed from the fight. I told myself land was out there somewhere. It had to be. The wind keened, the rain thickened, every roll of thunder felt closer than the last. My thoughts came slower now, like the storm had filled my skull with water. Then the boat jolted, hard. A grinding, dragging sensation pulled from beneath the hull. I checked the throttle. The engine roared, but the bow didn't lift. The world had gone still except for the sound of churning water. The surface ahead began to twist. At first it looked like a trick of the light, but the swirl widened, dark water funneling down into itself. A whirlpool, massive, patient, hungry. The current gripped the ship, dragging us sideways. "No!" I breathed, slamming the throttle to full. The engine screamed, coughing black smoke. I could smell fuel, hot metal, salt. The deck shuddered underfoot. The wheel fought me, spinning wild as I tried to break free. For a heartbeat, the boat clawed upward, The bow tilted, water spraying like shattered glass, the whirlpool shrinking behind me, and I almost believed I'd done it. Then the ocean split open. Something vast moved below, an impossible shadow swelling through the deep. A sound followed, not thunder, but something deeper, older. The surface exploded as the whale broke through, rising into the stormlight, its body the color of grave water, eyes black and knowing. It rose higher than seemed possible, raining sheets of salt and oil. The world shrank beneath its weight. For a frozen instant, it hung there above me, suspended between sea and sky. That was then I understood. I'd never been steering this ship, not once. The whale fell. Impact swallowed everything, sound, breath, thought. The sea folded over me like a hand closing into a fist. The cold hit next, sharp and endless, and the last thing I felt was the weight of the ocean dragging me down, down, down. I woke to cold, so sharp it felt like glass against my skin. The sea had gone flat again, iron gray, endless. I floated on a single life preserver, the only piece of my boat left. The water around me was silent, except for the faint hiss of rain meeting salt. She was gone. The boat was gone. Only I remained. Dawn bled weakly through the mist, a colorless stripe of light. Then something moved. Heads broke the surface, one, then another, then a dozen more. Pale faces drifted just above the waterline, black eyes unblinking. My breath hitched. For every one that surfaced, two more followed, until they ringed me in a perfect circle. Hair long as kelp swayed in the current, tangling together like dark roots. They rose higher. From the waist up they were near human, chalk-white skin, slick with scales along the ribs, shoulders marked with the scars of hooks and nets. Breasts sagged with the weight of the sea. Their mouths were too wide, corners stretching past where a smile should end. Some of them still wore scraps of line or bits of netting, trophies from the world above. The water pulsed once, and they began to hum, low, wordless, a vibration that trembled through my bones. Then she appeared, parting them as she glided forward, the one I had trapped. Her tail swept the surface with a sound like torn silk. The scars along it gleamed white against blue-gray flesh. She stopped an arm's length from me, eyes shining like coins left too long under water. "Oh, dry blood," she murmured, voice smooth as tide over stone. "You had your chance. My father doesn't take kindly to thieves. You are not the first, and you will not be the last." The water behind her darkened. A shadow gathered, huge and slow, until the sea itself seemed to rise. A figure heaved upward, half man, half abyss. His torso towered 12 feet from the surface, skin the color of dead coral, hair streaming black as tar. 6 eyes blinked in uneven rhythm, each one reflecting the pale sky. When he spoke, the air vibrated. "Dry blood," he rumbled, the sound rolling through the water. "You sought to take what belongs to the sea. Now you shall remain in it, a reminder to those who forget their place. The daughters around him lifted their faces to the dawn and began to sing in earnest. The harmony twisted, beautiful, unbearable, endless. My ears rang, my vision blurred, the song pressing through flesh and bone alike. Then came the pain. My legs cramped, folding in on themselves, the skin split and peeled like bark, veins turning silver beneath it. Scales erupted along my thighs, slick and cold. I reached for the preserver, but my hands were changing too, fingers webbing, nails hardening into translucent fins. I tried to scream, but my throat tore open. Water rushed in where air should be. Gills flared along my neck, each breath a slice of fire. The last thing I saw before the sea closed over me was her face, expressionless, waiting, as the chorus swelled around us. Their song filled the dark, and when I opened my mouth again, the note that joined them was my own.